Pixar is an interesting company. They've got their quirks, but usually when they say they're going to make a movie, more times than not, it's going to happen. Some companies announce title after title with so many stories that are left unadapted or filmed. Pixar, on the other hand, spends so much time writing and crafting their stories. By the time that they announce that film, they know it's something they want to do. So when Pixar's Newt was announced, fans were excited. I mean, there's even Easter eggs hidden in the back of Andy's room in Toy Story 3. And actually, a plot synopsis was given by the studio, which stated, "The last two blue-spotted newts are forced together by science to save the species. Unfortunately, they can't stand each other." Gary Ridstorm was attached to direct and write. And if you think his name sounds familiar, it's because he directed the Pixar short, Lifted. The film, other than being about the last two in a species, was about Newt and Brooke, and they were embarking on an unpredictable adventure and discovered that finding a mate never really goes as planned, even if you only have one choice. Love, as it turns out, is not a science. Now that's what Pixar released, but supposedly behind the scenes and after the announcements, Pixar was struggling with the story, and they actually handed it over to Pete Docter, who directed Up and Monsters Inc. He said he'd do it, but he actually had another idea that he's been kind of bouncing around as well. That idea turned out to be Inside Out. Obviously, the studio liked Pete Docter's idea, because they would go on to produce Inside Out, but it left Newt kinda on the cutting room floor. But according to sources, the real reason it was cancelled and shelved is that the story sounds extremely similar to what ended up being the story of Rio. As always, in this cancelled series, I always put my own spin on the movie, and I see if we can recycle these ideas to make them worthy to be made. It's up to you guys if I actually improve the ideas. But up to this point, it's been mainly sequels. This time, we have pretty much a blank canvas to work with. There are a couple plot points, and unfortunately, those plot points are kind of from Rio. So essentially, we need to start from scratch. So as we know, Rio kind of did exactly this story. But in my opinion, they did it in the most cliche way possible. An erotic bird who finds the last of the species, who is clearly attracted to the girl, but she's sassy, beautiful, and extremely uninterested in him. It feels like the worst kind of rom-com right off the bat. So let's throw that out and focus on Newt. Newt is not neurotic. He's confident. He knows his place. Now, the traditional way that you go about a film like this, much like Rio did, is having them stuck in a lab and they're forced together to mate until that wild adventure occurs. Now, Newt is different. He's already in the wild. He knows his place. He has friends. He enjoys sitting and staring up at the stars. He has his world and he's comfortable in it. He has his routine. We see him go about the same thing every day. He's kind of that floater kid in high school. Everyone's kind of friends with him, but he doesn't really have a best friend or a family. He sees that he's different than everyone else. He tries to join their pack, but really just doesn't quite fit in. He sits with the toads, they croak, and he just sits there pretending to be one. He swims with the frogs, and pretends to use his tongue, but secretly has a stockpile of dead bugs beside him. He's accepted, but he doesn't really fit in anywhere, but he tries. Until one day, spending time on those lily pads with the frogs, in the bushes, he sees a color similar to his own. He follows it until he crashes face to face with a female, blue-spotted newt. She seems frantic, but stops and stares at him. Newt's eyes are in shock, but doesn't say anything. He looks her up and down and examines her, and then she just springs into his arm and hugs him. She's talking in circles about how she's been lost from home and been searching, but doesn't know her way back. She's talking a mile a minute. She stops, and she says, "Will you help me?" Newt doesn't know who she is. He just knows he's never seen one like her before. Says he doesn't know the way either. Invites her over to sit with him, but walks away. Reluctantly, she sits there, and then eventually follows him. He explains he doesn't know much outside of this area, but welcomes her to stick around. She declines, and says she's gonna go out and do it herself. Newt goes home, and goes to sleep, and stares towards the skies again. Female Newt springs out of the bushes, come crashing into Newt's house, clearly being chased by something. Newt lets her sleep there that night. She introduces herself as Brooke, and they go to sleep. Then we get a montage of Newt and Brooke saying goodbye the next morning, then her coming running back with another creature chasing her. And the next day, where she nearly drowns and Newt has to save her. And it keeps on happening day after day after day. Till eventually, Newt breaks down one night and goes, "So where are we going?" She gets excited and explains her home and her owner. He's an older gentleman who's cared for her since she was young, and she needs to get back to him. And that next morning, they say goodbye to Newt's home. Newt looks back and glances at his home one last time before they embark on their adventure. He walks by his normal daily routine, glancing at them as he passes them. Now, similar to Finding Nemo, we're going to see a lot of dark places, meet some interesting characters. I'm not going to really dive into all of that. But as they travel, we hear Brooke slowly talking about her owner more and more. As they find their way, we can see Newt's not really talking about anything. Eventually, it becomes a little obvious that Newt has been a loner his entire life. He's a little envious. Eventually, he slowly talks more and more about his life, how he's been on his own from a very young age, and how he remembers his mother dying, and he misses her. Eventually, he tells her about how he ran away from home after his mom died, and how he never went back. They make their way back to Brooke's house. They create a bond, and Newt's actually looking forward to meeting Brooke's owner. Maybe this could be his home. Maybe he'd fit in here. And just as they make their way back to Brooke's home, the doors open, and it becomes very clear. It's a lab. Brooke happily starts walking towards the door, and someone swipes her up quickly and puts her in a container. She acts as if this is normal, and then they grab Newt and do the same. Brooke is telling him to calm down. Newt is scared and panicking inside the box. Cut to Brooke, who's calm and enjoying the ride. They get put into a glass cage, and Brooke sits back and enjoys being home. Newt is scurrying and running wall to wall. Brooke again tries to calm him. As Newt's running, we hear him talking under his breath. "This isn't safe. We need to leave. We need to..." And then a light turns on and shocks them. A daunting hand comes out and grabs Newt. We see them turn over Newt and reveal his foot, which on the bottom has a number. As they're doing this, Brooke looks at her foot too. She has the same number. Newt is brought to another cage, and tests occur, and needles prick into him. He is scared and tries to scurry away, and just as he's about to break free, a face comes from the dark. A smiling face. It's Brooke's owner, the one she's been talking about. He smiles genuinely and apologizes in a nice, calm voice, and then smiles and says, "I know it's been years, but I know that face anywhere. Welcome back, Alex," and puts him in the cage with Brooke. Newt and Brooke look at each other. As he places him in the cage, he says, "Now go have fun with your sister." And Brooke and Newt's eyes go big. Cut to Newt fully explaining a flashback of him leaving home. He remembers his mother dying and how he fled, but we see that she actually died shortly after childbirth. We see Newt crawling up to meet his baby sister, cuddling with his mom, and we see a younger version of Brooke and her owner. Brooke's owner smiles as Newt's mom shows him Brooke, and then Newt's mom starts to breathe heavily, and her eyes roll back, and she passes out. Newt is quickly grabbed from the cage and placed in the cage right next to it. He's crying and screaming for his mom. Eventually, he knocks the cage to the ground. It crashes to the floor, and Newt starts running. As people come into the room, he nearly gets trampled, and runs until he finds himself in the middle of traffic, and runs until he finally gets into safety. He's exhausted and scared. He looks across the road at the lab and tries to walk back until a car almost squishes him again. He cuddles into a ball and sleeps there. Cut back and we see pictures of Newt's family on the wall. They sit in silence for a while. Newt glances at the pictures on the wall. Brooke asks what their mom was like, and Newt smiles and says, "You would have loved her. Think about the kindest, most loving person, and then double it." Cut to Brooke and Newt back in Newt's home, doing his daily routine, the same as the beginning of the film. But now Brooke is there. He has someone to share in his day. They pretend to be frogs, but they laugh as they're doing it. They are happy. They're playful. They're having fun. When they're all finished with the routine, they make their way back to the edge of the bushes, where Brooke's owner is waiting for them, reading a paper. He picks them up and says, "Hey kids, have a good day at the park?" And they walk away. So that's my version of Pixar's Newt. I turned it from a little bit of a last of the species needing to mate to last of the species looking for family. I know I got a little far from the original premise, but if you enjoyed this or any of my other canceled versions, comment which canceled movie you'd like to see me tackle next. For that matter, any movie that didn't quite live up to expectations or that can be improved on. Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you my patrons: Adam Gray, Jeremy Jacobs, Jenny Edwards, Jeremy Robson, Gabe Marchand, Trevor Cowan, Gunnar Leglin, Colleen West, Estad Hemzaj, Marco Perry, Roland, Ada McShange, Lon Hudson, Kieran Hunt, Joris Konen, Brandon Warner, and Sweevy. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you guys in the next video.